show where nerds and geeks come together, not for beef, because this show is Switzerland. I'm Mr. King, aka Mike, and with me is my bro Evan, aka Moose, and Animus creative director Ed Rodriguez, aka Eddie. What's going on, fellas? How you guys doing tonight?
Great, thanks for having me on.
Hey, Mike, doing pretty well. Nice to meet you, Eddie. This is our first time meeting each other.
I'm really hyped to have you on the show, Ed. Been friends for a while, and I've been a big fan of what you're doing with Animus, your card game. It's amazing. I kind of want to give you a little bit of space to kind of talk about it. Can you tell us, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how long you've been doing this kind of stuff?
Sure, and I'll try to keep it brief because I can always go on tangents. But I'm Ed Rodriguez. I have worked in the gaming industry, the tabletop games industry. I originally was a director in sales and marketing for a small startup game company called Griggling Games. We produced a couple of games, and biggest thing I learned from there was don't make big box games your first games to produce. It's better to go a little bit smaller. But I learned a lot of stuff there, and then more recently, what I do is I sort of do freelance convention marketing. Different companies will have me fly out with them to different conventions and with setting up for their booths or consulting and just help running booths and stuff like that. So a lot of hands-on stuff. I like meeting with people and talking with them, talking about games and all that. And then more recently, my solo endeavor has been the Animus card game, which is I call it a draft booting card game. I've always been a fan of I'm dating myself a little bit, but I've been playing Magic the Gathering when it first came out. That and card games like that, Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Pokemon card game and all that. A huge fan of those, and I wanted to do something like that. But the twist for me was I wanted to, I'm also a big fan of fighting video games like Marvel vs. Capcom and Super Smash Brothers, and I love how they have like all these characters from different franchises mixed together. It's no surprise that I'm a huge fan of the Avengers and Infinity War and Endgame because they're getting all these characters together. So I wanted to do something that was like that, but in a card game format, which isn't new, right? There's been other attempts to do that, but there were two things that I wanted to do that was going to be really different. First, I wanted to address a couple of gripes that me and some other players have about the games, even though we love them. One of the bad things about collectible card games is that you got to spend a lot of money buying booster packs on these little booster packs to try to get the right cards. Wanted to get away from that. I don't have time to be spending money on that. I don't have the inclination for that anymore. And I also don't really have the time to be like spending time building all these decks and all that and playtesting them and being super competitive. And then the third thing that I wanted to address was that, okay, it's fine if Mike goes and buys a bunch of cards and has a cool deck that he wants to play, but if Moose doesn't have any cards, what are you going to do? You can't play, or you
Yep.
form. So what the Animus Draft Booting card game does is you get everything in one box, and it's actually a little small box. All the cards, when you buy a set, there's nothing random. You know what's coming in the box, and it's just one purchase. And then instead of spending time building decks to play, this is why I call it draft building card game. Is that there's some rules where some cards are laid out, and you actually draft cards for your deck. Now your deck is only 9 cards, so you're only drafting a few cards. So the process of putting together your deck is actually very quick and is part of the game. So you quickly pick your cards, they become part of your deck, and then you battle it out with the characters that you have. And with the whole multiverse theme, again, a game where you've got fantasy characters, facing off against sci-fi characters, right next to superhero characters, next to alien invaders. Is like a little bit of everything is thrown in there. So it's a little bit homage to, like I said, the Marvel vs. Capcom. Just having all these characters, just facing off, battling it out. And so that just launched actually just in this past December, in December 2020. That launched, and then coming up, I'm following up with
Real
it.
fast, Ed.
Yeah.
Real fast. Where can we find all of this stuff, man? Like this is
Oh,
crazy.
well,
Where can we find all
everything
this?
about it is all condensed on one website. It's called animuscardgame.com, and people
We'll
can
put a
go there
link
and
below.
check it out. Sure. And so really excited about it. I think yeah, the feedback from people has been just really really great. One of the biggest things that was um, at the forefront of creating this was um, I really wanted to create something where there were a bunch of characters that people would like. Like I didn't play the game because it's just like, oh, I'm super competitive and I'm gonna be good at this. And there's that, you can do that. But I wanted people to just look at it and be like, man, these characters are cool. And that character right there, I want to play as that. I want to be that. And so, me and the artists, we just spent like as much time as possible, just developing these characters, having deep backstories for them. And I wanted people to be able to like relate to these characters and see themselves and sort of really connect with them. And hopefully, I've done that. I don't know.
I
The
liked it
fans
when
will
we
let me
first played.
know.
I liked it when we first played, my brother and I. Like that was hell fun. I know that the game went through some changes since then, but like ultimately, like it was pretty easy to pick up. The approachability was off the charts. Like if you never played deck building games in general, if you never played games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, or the like, you could sit down with Animus, pick it up immediately, and it's really about like the strategy that you develop, but also kind of I've seen it like more revolve around just kind of you know just being, I don't want to say just like developing your own strategies in a way that works well for you, like personalized, even with any deck or cards that you get, like you could kind of still add your own kind of signature or flair style of playing. And people can either be the victim of or exploit uh those techniques that you might bring to the game. I don't want to
Which,
get too far into that.
and
I
just to
know.
address that one last thing,
Go on.
just to address that though. So one of the design decisions early on was in card games like Magic and most card games, you come to the game with a preset strategy, right? Like you built your deck, and my deck is going to be like hyper aggressive, or my deck is super defensive, and that's my strategy. You kind of can't do that in Animus because you don't know what cards you're going to get to you're gonna it's a draft. So the game is very much about the players that can adapt on the fly and just sort of figure out a strategy. Just basically, you play with the cards that you have. It's kind of like poker in a way. You play with the cards that are dealt to you, and then the players that are able to adapt better are the ones that succeed. So
I got a Uno vibe from it. That's kind of like the realm I was feeling. Like it was more like Magic than not, but like it felt a lot like Uno as far as the cards that I got. But like you said, if you got like a whole deck of like red and this dude's got a deck of green. anyway, real quick, Evan. I mean, this is low key a little bit of a milestone for me personally because honestly I've been waiting for an opportunity for us to be able to do something like this together. So I'm happy that you're here, Ev. Can you
Well,
tell us a
thank
little
you.
bit yourself, a little bit about like what I'm saying, the stuff like the games that you play and kind of just uh, your nerdiness and geekness in general?
So for my journal geekness, just kind of a run-of-the-mill closet nerd who grew up in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a lot of farmers and a lot of hardy, manly men. So I kept my little nerd stuff close to my little nerd heart. Um, for D&D specifically, I was always a big fan of D&D, but never had the boldness to approach somebody else about the subject. So I listened to a lot of podcasts of other people playing. I read the books and just kind of stared at them longingly. As one of those people, and it wasn't until fifth edition that I actually got around to putting a group together and playing. In classic D&D fashion, we had scheduling issues, and very soon after starting, I actually started DMing, and I have DM the majority of my career playing D&D, if you would, um, with, as you know yourself, Mike, longtime player and hot seat swapping out to be DM as well. Mike's also run us through some things which are a lot of fun. For other generally nerdy stuff, I am a lazy anime nerd. I really like anime. I have like old school anime stories of like one kid would record it on his DVR. We passed the VHS around at school, and that's how I watched Outlaw Star when I was growing up, my first real anime. Um, and just like general nerdiness, all the things that are really kind of becoming mainstream nerd, of course, I love as well.
Isn't that
We're
so
talking
great? Isn't it so great that nerdiness is cool now?
oh, oh, it's so good. It just like it's so nice that when you can be like, I'm just gonna let my nerd flag fly, and then it's like, oh, that's totally normal. Our Mike and I's D&D group started as I got drunk at a work event and started to complain about how I never got to play D&D. And one of my coworkers was like, "Well, hell, I'll play D&D with you. What do you mean you've never got to play D&D?" Um, and she has since moved and plays with us occasionally, but not really anymore. But that's where that core group came from, was first work people and then reaching out to my other friends and going, "Oh, I know somebody who I think wants to play D&D."
What about you, Ed? What about you? What tabletop games have you been like messing with that aren't necessarily Animus or I mean, if D&D is your fancy, go for it. But like, what's your uh geek niche, as it were?
My biggest passion, well, COVID has really put a damper on it. But I love playing tabletop games in person, and I played a lot of what they call designer board games. So, not the regular old Monopoly. We're talking about like the Settlers of the Catan and Ticket to Ride and things like that. Sometimes they call them Euro games. Very strategic. These are games for adult level intellect. And so I got into a lot of those. But then there was a subset of those that I've now love is the cooperative board games. I'm always used to board games, oh, it's me versus you, and there's only going to be one winner. Now you've got a slew of board games where it's the players playing against the game. So like, it's kind of funny. Pandemic is like one of the most famous ones. It's called Pandemic, and the game is the players are a group of scientists that are trying to save the world from a global pandemic that's going on. And it opened my eyes to just like what you can really do with board games, and a board game can be a very inclusive and social gathering, and not just a group of people hiding in a corner playing there. Like it can be like I said, very social, a lot of discussion, especially in the co-op games. The players tend to have a lot of discussion before they make their move. Like, oh, I'm gonna move this meeple here to there. Well, maybe I should do this, and it opens up all these discussions. And I like that. In fact, you can probably see on my thing I have Haven over here and something called Seventh Continent, which are actually kind of tough. At least at the time they came out, were kind of tough to find. I had to get them through Kickstarter and all that. But they're co-op games where Gloomhaven is essentially D&D in a box, right? It's a giant box, and it's got a full campaign of like 100 adventures, but you play it like it's like Final Fantasy Tactics meets D&D. And so that's unfortunately I got that just before the pandemic. So I haven't really been able to play it as much, although I think they have a digital version. But I want to play that one because it's got the cool minis that I took the time to paint and all that. So that's been my thing, co-op stuff. So which leads to why I love playing RPGs, and I actually more enjoy being a DM than a player. Although I love playing, I just get a kick out of setting up a world and then letting the players just go crazy with it. And I very rarely tell my players no to something. Like whenever they say they want to do something, I learned it's kind of better to maybe you don't have to give them 100% leeway, but work with them on it. And usually it's gonna end up being something funnier and more exciting than anything I could have come up with on my own.
Cool. So I want to get to you guys and start asking a little bit more questions. Like, I want to talk a little bit about the tabletop scene currently. We all got to talking a little bit before recording specifically about Dungeons and Dragons, and just out of curiosity, you both can answer in whatever order you'd like. What do you prefer playing in, campaigns or one-offs?
I think I can go first if you don't mind there, Ed. I think I personally really revel in DMing a one-shot. Because for me, when I DM a one-shot, the gloves are off. I'm going to do something insane because the rules don't matter anymore. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to roll with, you can do probably anything you ask me that you want to do if there's some rule that supports why you can do that. But I will probably also drop an airship on you or be like, oh, here's a dragon. Or you pissed off your NPC. He's going to cast a wish and just wish you were all dead. I really, really enjoy DMing the one shot. But there is nothing like a consistent ongoing campaign where you build your little gags and your little inside jokes and everybody kind of has, even if you're playing by the books and really not trying to homebrew anything, you always end up with your own table stuff that just you guys talk about. My favorite example of that is one of our very first games, we decided that when you speak Dragonborn or when you speak Draconic, if you speak Draconic, it sounds like you're a Valley Girl. And if you don't, it's really gravelly and you have no idea what's going on. And the best is when there are two very burly looking players, say a Dragonborn and a Minotaur, who are looking at each other, going, oh, yeah. And then actually in character, the players are going, I cannot believe what he did to that goblin. OMG. We've got to get away from this guy. So those are just my own personal views.
What about you, Ed?
I'm actually up until more recently I've been doing kind of a hybrid of one shot and campaign, and I'll explain. So for a little while I was doing just straight up one shots, like Evan described, where it's a one shot. And but what I was this was in the context was I was actually working for a board game store where they wanted me to come in once a week and run D&D. And because you never knew who was going to be playing, I basically made it like it's going to be a one shot, and you don't have to feel like you need to be here every week. If you're not here a week, you just miss out on that adventure. But we're gonna just treat it as it's a whole new thing. The characters could be consistent, like a player could keep their character, but they didn't need to be there for each session, and there wasn't gonna be a real narrative connecting them. And I did enjoy that. For my personal group, I took a lot of those one shots and kept them as one shots, but now I started stringing them along. And what was interesting was the way I presented it to the players. I was like, look, we are playing single one-shot adventures, which we'll probably do in one or two sessions, but you keep your characters and they'll level up and they're going to go from one to another. But just because like eight NPCs introduced in one doesn't mean he's like this super important character that's going to be, part of a big campaign. Just kind of keep that in mind. So it's been a more of a hybrid thing that I've been doing where the adventures have been just, these single one shots. But like you said, we get the benefit of we've got these guests because now we're getting to know these player characters and developing them more and more. And it also helped that these players are kind of new to Dungeons and Dragons, so it's a good way to introduce them. But now we're transitioning to doing like more full level campaign things because I think they're sort of graduating into wanting that. Like I can see they want a little bit more persistence in the world. They want to feel like there's more because like a lot of one shots can often feel somewhat linear, right? Especially if it's a dungeon. Like it's a lot of one shots are it's a dungeon, you're gonna go, or it's a haunted mansion, you're gonna go and do it. So what I tried to do was have those linear ones like in between. So I would have like a mystery one, and then a linear dungeon, and then maybe a heist adventure, and then another more linear one. So the linear ones kind of give their brains a little bit of break. Like, okay, we know we're here. We're just gonna kind of just more tactical stuff, and then the next one is gonna be something a little bit more cerebral. And that's what I've been doing. It's been a lot of fun.
So with that, we've noticed that, well, not even noticed, they've put out a couple of new installments to like, their array of different book series that kind of like have their own specific worlds. And particularly the one connected to the Forgotten Realms is Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And currently also they're adding Candlekeep Mysteries. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say controversy, but that's kind of like a lack of a term. You know what I'm saying? I don't really have, but there's been a lot of conversation around these particular two installments that are dropping. Before I even go into too many specifics, what's y'all take on Tasha's and Candlekeep Mysteries?
I mean, you can go good first, as I was just talking a mile a minute.
So, Tasha's I'm really excited about because predominantly for me is because I'm a player again right now. I just wrapped up doing my year in the DM seat and handed it off to somebody else. And so for me as a player, you got new items, you got new stuff for me to look at. I just want to dig down in and get my grubby little fingers all up in there. Candlekeep, I'm a little less excited for, and the kind of reason is for me is because the game that we just ran was Saltmarsh, which was kind of a similar setup of the story where it's a collection of adventures that are meant for you to be slotted in, and in Saltmarsh they kind of wrote something to string them all together, and I started to work with that, and then I looked at it and went, I don't like that at all. I'm not into this, and I was like, you know what? And I took that book and I just closed it right on up. And I was like, this is now my setting book and not my adventure book. And we kind of freeformed our last story arc for it, which ended up being a lot more fun. But it was built on Saltmarsh, which was great. But it's really got to be for slotting it. That's it. To me, I would not try to string it together just as we're just going to play Candlekeep. Because from my experience, I want those adventures just for single contained adventures I'm going to put in one of my other stories.
And it's funny. I've actually not been getting more a lot of the official D&D materials. I've been going looking online, and I'm very excited to check out like a lot of indie written campaigns and adventures. Like there's a bunch of, like, if you go to like Drive Through RPG is a great site that I like. You can find a lot of one shot adventures or even campaigns, and they're not perfect. They're sometimes written by one person and not a big team, but they're almost always very, very creative. They're kind of thinking outside the box. They're not, it's not like a corporate mindset. And so I've been able to find a lot of interesting stuff there. So I have not actually, I must confess, I have not looked very just Tasha's Cauldron, is it? But as a DM, I always get worried of having too much stuff for the players to look at, especially if I have newer players. So I try to keep things as least confusing as possible, but I am super excited about Candlekeep Mysteries because my understanding it's a collection of one-shot adventures, which we were talking about, which I, because like Evan said, you can find reasons to string them together or just use them as one-shots here and there. So I'm particularly excited about that one, and actually not as much of the other one, just because in the, like, in the three main books, in the player's guide and the DM's guide and the master manual, there's like that's all you need to ever play. Like if you never have anything more than that, you still have you know decades worth of play material. But I still do like getting supplements and all that. I just try to watch my wallet.
Yep, for sure.
Welcome to my world. Before we go on, fellas, this won't get recorded. This piece won't get recorded right here. I was just telling Evan, my phone is not charging despite being on its charger. What I'm going to do is stop us right here, and I'm going to throw my phone on a better charger, and I'm going to actually continue from that question, and we're going to move on to the next part. But I don't, because like we're almost done. I maybe got like 5 more questions for you guys, and I
Okay.
don't want to necessarily let my phone die
Yeah.
and lose all this info.
All right.
I don't know if
So
you have this
um,
on your list of questions, but I think I would talk about what other TTRPGs are you guys excited for, interested, playing, want to check out, that kind of stuff.
I do got that question actually. It is on
Cool.
there. Uh, I hope you guys are not going to be weirded out the fact that I played the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness by Palladium Games, but that's another story. We'll talk
I
about that
Oh
later.
remember that. My
man,
God, I remember. I think I had that.
I'm not
And I
surprised
know
That
I
was
at
never
like
all.
played it,
19
but I
like
think I had it.
80.
I'm pretty sure I
That was
had
like
it.
1988.
Yeah.
Uh, Mike, if you think that's embarrassing, or you think that's kind of an embarrassing system to be playing, Madeline and I are actually going to be playing the Sailor Moon RPG together.
I
God.
think that one beats mine. Because I was gonna say the weirdest one that I think I still have. Oh no, I think I sold it. I used to have something called Toon, the role playing game.
I guess my next question is pretty much on the same par as the last one. Just do you feel like uh with these new installments that just they're coming out, and well, what's Tosh is being just released, and Candlekeep Mysteries is just coming out. Um, do you feel like this is like the swan song of fifth edition, or is this an attempt to like revive interest?
That is an interesting question. I think you can say it's maybe a little bit both. I think a swan song might be a little strong of a term for most people. You could definitely say that, I mean, fifth edition is getting long in the tooth. Fifth edition came out in what, 2014? So we're up over 6 years. I think second edition was the last one that was over 5 years for its lifespan. So just like speaking of past indication, yes, fifth edition is getting long. It's got lots of source books. It's got lots of adventure books now. I don't think we're necessarily at the end of fifth edition, just because it does have huge popularity currently, and so many people are running. If they did decide to release sixth, I don't think we'd see people hopping over right away. I don't think I would. I think I personally would be more interested in a 5.5, little tweak, little updates. But I think there's definitely merit in saying that fifth edition is probably coming to a close sometime in the next few years, relatively soon, speaking, if you would. Um,
I'm gonna put a pin
but
in
yeah,
that 5.5 stuff, but yeah, go on.
well, I
I
didn't really have much more to say.
I think I more or less agree on that. Although I think fifth edition is gonna be around for a long time still, and for the main reason you said, fifth edition has introduced a lot of new players to the game, and you know it's their first love. They're gonna love this, and it's introducing people that have never would ordinarily not play. And I blame Stranger Things for this, which in all the best ways. I think Stranger Things really got people on this. And so, from a pure business perspective, um, it just behooves I was gonna say TSR. It behooves Wizards to really ride this gravy train out. And um not for nothing, I really think, and I think that's what you're seeing with some of the stuff that they're doing. I do know and speak with some people that one of the things that they wanted to do with fifth edition was actually be kind of experimental and try to do some, offbeat, campaigns, or just try to do things a little bit out of the normal and not just, not just the usual campaigns that everybody's used to, the Greyhawk campaign, the Forgotten Realms, and all that. Those are a given. They were like, they want to try to do other stuff, especially since Wizards has so many properties to draw upon, which made me really excited when they did the Ravnica book. I'm a bit sad that it looks like that might be it. It might be just that one book. I would like to see more on that. I would like to at least see more official adventures on that. But that source book has been like really, I've been really impressed with what they put in there. And that's also sort of the problem, is that it takes a lot of work to take a whole new property and get it to fit in there, with the amount of detail that they have to research and include in there. But I think these still a lot of life left for fifth edition. I think there's a lot more that they can explore, and I think they will. And I think, even if they had plans of going to sixth edition, I'm sure COVID, punted those plans way, way,
Yeah.
way down. But inversely, I think it's also been kind of good for them because, you know, all these lockdowns have made people try out RPGs online and play this. So I think there's a lot more. I think playing like this, or this, Skype and Zoom and all that, has opened people's eyes to how much you can actually do, and still be socially distant. So I think all those things combined is gonna gives fifth edition in particular a long life. And I think any plans that they might have had for sixth edition is probably already in motion. I mean, they're probably playtesting some stuff. I wouldn't be surprised at that, but I think you know real concrete plans have probably at this point been shuffled a little bit further down the line. Um, I wouldn't expect to see something still for another, like, at least 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, I think kind of put a little button on that would be that fifth edition is starting to feel the bloat from having a lot of content. And like at our table, we restricted, like, if the dungeon master does not have access to that book doesn't exist for our game.
Yeah.
That's how that works. Like the DM has to have a copy, you have to send them stuff, that kind of stuff. So I think it's starting to feel the bloat, but it is not at critical mass yet. I think it's still got definitely a lot of game left in it.
And yeah, and that's what I mean. I think if they keep, and I think this is the way they're going. I think if they keep putting fresh stuff, like, like this is why I'm particularly interested in the Candlekeep Mysteries, because I think it's gonna be fresh new adventures. Um, and if they keep doing stuff like that rather than just more content, like the Tasha's
Yeah.
book looks like it's just more content, and that can be overwhelming. But if they start doing, do more stuff, like I really think they absolutely should do Dark Sun, the Dark Sun campaign, which I'm actually, if you're gonna hate me for this, I'm not a super fan of Dark Sun, but I think it's still a cool campaign. And I think there's people that are clamoring for that, and I'll be shocked if they don't do it. But stuff like that, I think they can resurrect a lot of stuff from the past, within fifth edition, and still keep it going for a long time. I mean, they could do Dark Sun. I'm dying for them to do Spelljammer, which, I'm dating myself there. That is like old school D&D, but I think there's a lot of stuff. And in speaking with, because I've worked on work with some of the designers, and I know one of the things that they wanted to do was, you know, go a little bit outside the box. Yes, have a lot of the stuff that people expect from D&D, proper, but let's, how can we push the boundaries? How can we include other universes in this? More than just what they gained under TSR. And so I think you're gonna see. I think we still have a lot of cool stuff left to come. Anyway, that's all my blabbering.
Well, with that being said, I don't want it to be completely D&D heavy, guys. There are so many tabletop RPGs. Like Dungeons and Dragons is not the only game in town. Like there's a lot of games out there. Like I started with second edition. I don't know if you guys know that, but even without second edition, I was also playing. This is me aging myself here. I was playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. That came out in like I want to say 87, 88, 89. It was around the time when the show first started getting popular and Dungeons and Dragons had already been in high swing and they had some cool features, some like bio E points to further mutate your animal into a further mutant, um and like equipping weapons, learning languages, all of that traditional stuff that you will find in role playing games. But I mean, it was pretty cool to create your own mutant in that particular universe. And the way that the Palladium games work is they're all connected to all their other games. So like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangers was connected to the greater Rifts universe, and the Rifts universe had other like games that would come into play, like ninjas and other strangers or ninjas and madness. There's like different titles, but there was like a whole bunch of stuffs, and each supplement complemented the other supplement, and it was really cool. But it was a little complicated. It was again at the time that it released, second edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was like at the height, so it ran off of a similar system to FAC. I don't want to say it. But who you got?
I remember playing that. Well, I remember where it started. It started with GURPS, the generic universal role playing system, and then they basically applied it to everything. They made Rifts. They made the Ninja Turtles. God, they made so many things on that. My favorite one was Rifts, though. Rifts was one of my favorite ones that I played. I thought they had some just really cool. It was like a weird mix of cyberpunk and Mad Max,
Yeah,
and
yeah, like
with
cyberpunk,
D&D
like
in the middle,
fantasy.
and they somehow got that to work with just one. And not to mention that with Rifts, you could include every other Palladium game. So you could have Rifts be playing Rifts, but you could have the Ninja Turtles come through a portal. We played a game where my character was the Predator from the movie, and I came through the rift to hunt vampires. That's how weird and crazy rifts could get. That was my favorite one. Was playing rifts because you could do just some really crazy stuff. Although Palladium vampire joke, they are no joke. They are worse, more powerful than D&D vampires. So little spoiler and word of warning to anybody that's playing any of that. But yeah, are you guys playing anything else other than D&D?
At the moment, I am just playing D&D. There's so many things I want to sink my teeth into, though. I'm getting ready. My girlfriend and I, we're gonna run through and do a little one-on-one of the Sailor Moon RPG, which doesn't seem particularly well balanced. So we'll be doing some tweaks as we go along the way. But it's a more simple system. We played some D&D together, and she was not about all the rules, and English is not her first language, so she had trouble with the terminology. It's just a 2d6 system, though, so it should be way more simple. I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing that. For one-shot stuff, I've played some Lasers and Feelings, which I don't know if you all play that. Lasers and Feelings is so much fun. If you got a good group together who are ready to just RP the heck out of it, it separates all your mechanics into two things. It's either something you feel about or it's something technology focused, and so it's lasers. It's designed to be one shot. The DM rolls, or the GM in this case, rolls on a table to see what your adventure is, and then tells you what's happening, and you and your crew figure it out. Last time I played, I was a robot who was just really sad. some like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy vibes kind of deal. And it was just an absolute blast. I really want to get into actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf. I got real close to getting a group together for it, and then it kind of fell apart at the last second when people were like, "Wait, so you want us to play a game where Shia LaBeouf is going to try to hunt us down and eat us?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. I mean, this sounds like fun, right?" Um, Other kind of more traditional, not one-shotty stuff. I've been really interested in getting stuff that's way more RP heavy. Our D&D campaign is pretty hard RP heavy, and I love it. But D&D is still kind of built for combat in a way, even in 5th edition, even though it is way more open for RP. So I'm really interested in trying out either Monster Hearts if people want to be a little bit more horny, or come on, that's how Monster Hearts is. It's it's your teenage supernatural stuff. Or Monster of the Week if you want to be a little less horny, but a little more role play. Both those systems are a little more simple, pretty different from D&D, and very role play focused, which I think is really awesome. And you can really have the players help you shape the world as you go along.
That's cool. I want to before we move on to, I want to give a little shout out to a little indie game, and if you can find this game, you love role playing, you got to try this out. It's called Pocket Odyssey. It was a Kickstarter. Geez, I don't know how many, like at least 5. And I think there's some copies floating around that you can buy, but it's literally D&D in a box like this big. And what it is that when you sit down to play, you're going to create a character, and that character is only going to exist for that session that you're playing, right? And everything is randomized. So you have several decks of cards, and they're these little mini cards like this big. And so like you have to draw 3 cards and pick one of them, and that's going to be your character's like flaw, or one of them is going to be your character's belief. So craft your characters by randomly drawing these cards, and that's going to create your character. So like the character race and class is going to be randomly drawn, and you have choices, so you draw 3 and maybe pick one, but you're going to have a different race, a different class, and you're going to have strengths and weaknesses and all that. And then the same thing for the DM. The DM is going to draw these like cards that are sort of like adventure hooks, and he's got to figure out how to string these 3. It's usually like three random adventure hooks. He's got to string them together into one like role-playing session, and then the game comes with these larger cards, and they're about the size of the box, and they're basically terrain tiles, and you put like only like 4 together, create a whole scene. And so it's a really neat, and I think it uses like 2d6s, like kind of like the other game, to do stuff, and it's a very, very super simple system. But what's fun about it is that you never know what you're gonna do, and almost everything is made up on the spot. The characters are kind of made up on the spot. The DM is making the adventure on the spot, and like anything that's being done on the spot, it usually ends up as some kind of hilarity or anything like that. So Pocket Odyssey, I think, is a really fun little game to try out, especially because you just sit down, you play it. It's a single session, and if you don't like it, whatever, box it up. But most of the time, you're gonna want to play another one right away, because to see just what other crazy stuff you can come up with. So that's the other than D&D game that I have to recommend.
It sounds like a great road trip game. Like you're going along somewhere, playing the car.
I pack it all the time because it's so small. I got the deluxe edition that has everything in it, and it's not really bigger than this.
Real quick, what do you think? Like, what do you think is like the main thing that started inspiring folks to start jumping into Dungeons and Dragons that otherwise wouldn't have? Do you think it's all like the success of like shows like Critical Role on YouTube, or do you feel like the pandemic might have just opened that door for folks to kind of want to start these type of games, or what? I mean, I ain't gonna lie, guys. Like maybe last year, not even last year, 2 years ago, I got a husband and wife who I've been really good friends with for like the last 3 decades, like pretty much my best friend. But I got a husband and wife. I got to DM them, in a one-shot adventure that was pretty freaking fun. But otherwise, if I had talked to them like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they'd be like, Dungeons and Dragons, dude, you're an adult. You know?
I think I kind of know how it all got to this point. I think it's really because design of board games. Um, there's a lot of people that have gotten into D&D, but they started because they started discovering this new breed of board games that they had never heard of. You tell, oh, let's play board games to somebody that doesn't play. What's the first thing they think of? Oh, Risk and Monopoly, and they think of the 3-hour board game, Monopoly marathons and all that, and they're like, no, I don't want to play board games. But they discovered that there's these games, these robust that you can play in like 45 minutes, like Ticket to Ride and all that. And those were popularized by the Tabletop show on YouTube, which was really, really popular. And I think that show did a whole lot to introduce people to that hobby. And I think by virtue of people playing that, they, kind of naturally discovered like, oh, there's other stuff that, is, tangential to it. So I think that's, at least in my experience, people that I've met that are newly getting into RPGs, they got into it because of they discovered board games and started playing that and just sort of progressed. Especially when they discover that there's cooperative board games, and I think that really easily segues people to playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's actually when people tell me that they're thinking of playing RPGs, sometimes I tell them try cooperative board games first and see how they like that, because that kind of just sort of sets up the framework for what you can expect in an RPG. Because it's the same thing. RPG is a cooperative game that you're playing together. The only difference is then RPG you have a lot more freedom. You have the freedom of imagination, whereas a cooperative board game, it's a little bit more contained, or a lot more contained rather.
I think it's for me, it's hard to pin down any one big contributing factor, because I think that first we've had like a couple of things happen, right? If you think about it, that first, it has never been easier or more mainstream to be nerdy, and like Marvel Cinematic Universe going crazy at the box office, everybody's a nerd now, right? And so now
I credit them. I fully credit them.
It's more open for a dialogue, easier to say nerdy shit in public in front of other people, in front of your coworkers, in front of whatever, So then you have these other things, like you mentioned, Mike. We've got Critical Role being super successful. We've got other things like Drunks and Dragons, or my apologies now, Greetings Adventurers, who have been going for ages. They were playing back in 4th edition, And you've got stuff like Stranger Things that are suddenly poking people and going, hey, you can talk about nerdy shit now. You remember D&D's a thing, right? Like, it's still around. There was a new edition a few years ago. Everybody loves it. Easier than ever to get into. And that's the kind of stuff where we now have this environment where it's easier to get into nerdy shit. Like, if you're somebody who loves BTS, you're just a K-pop stan now. You're not some super weird person who's into Asian shit for whatever reason. You're not completely ostracized by people. You're just somebody who's like a K-pop head, So it is way easier to be a nerd. And so now we've got more things reminding us about other nerdy shit. And I can't say that COVID's not a part of it either, because even though we were already playing virtually in our game and at our table before that, because we got people all over the country, attendance has never been better at our table than it was starting April 2020. The only person who's been inconsistent is a nurse. And what are you going to do? Tell them stop saving COVID patients? Like, we just take the week off so he can be there next time. So yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. And from any standpoint, you hear about D&D now, it's more popular and it's easier to get into, and you're going to want to play.
And I think also in like in pop culture goes in cycles. Yeah, I mean the human race kind of goes in cycles, and it seems like every like 20 or 30 years we suddenly get interested in a decade from an entire decade from before. So I think there's like this big interest in like the 80s, right.
Yep.
I mean, although D&D originated in the 70s, like it was more bigger in the 80s, and I think that's just, you know, it- that got pulled into the zeitgeist of everyone. But yeah, I mean, I think it's so many. Um, I think COVID. It's weird that a horrible pandemic has actually kind of done some, because I think it gives like I feel like a lot of people, myself included, are kind of starved for social interaction, and we're looking for just
For
something to
sure.
talk
Yeah.
about. So when you have stuff like The Mandalorian comes out and WandaVision come out, like people can't help it gives them years of it's nerdy. We need something to talk about, and I think just it's sort of a perfect storm of just like things coming together.
That's a really good point you made there, Eddie, because for a lot of like my nerdy friends, they're used to socializing online, like they're online all the time now. And then you're seeing people less nerdy who are suddenly like, I can't go to the bar and drink 18 beers. What am I going to do with my night? And suddenly they're like, well, George has been bugging me to join his D&D campaign forever. I guess I'll play a one shot. And you see more and more people just going, well, I can't do anything else. I have been talking to only my cat for 3 weeks. I guess I could jump on this call and see what D&D is all about.
Well, it's like at the beginning of the pandemic when my job said, "Yeah, we need you to go socialize with people and just entertain yourself at home." It's like, oh, so that what I do, what I already do. I work,
Yep.
go home, play online video games or whatever.
Sorry, guys. Thought I wasn't muted. Talking to myself right there. So, I guess my last question, and then we gotta start the wind down, is what does that mean for the old guard? Huh? Like the nerds that already were, like you said, Ed, and as you said, Evan, were kind of already in that boat of like being at home, using like virtual connections and stuff like that, and just being more open with their nerdyism and nerd stuff. Uh, do you feel like there's a justification behind some of the, I hate saying the word, but it's gatekeeping that's been happening around the realms of cats that are kind of like, I mean, I've been here before it was cool to be like, have pocket protectors. Like, is it that, or are they just kind of being like a little bit more selfish and whatnot? Because I mean, I feel both sides of the argument, because there were, when I was coming up, and I'm pretty sure it was the same for you guys. Being a nerd wasn't that cool, and I seen nerds get beat. I got beat up. I don't care. Like, it happened. Like, yo, I've seen it. I've been on the receiving end of it. And hell, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I had, I guess, a little bit of a moment where it's kind of like, oh, now it's all right to kind of be, geeky. Now it's okay to talk about, like, fantasy science fiction stuff and comic stuff. Do they have a right to be pissed off, or are they kind of just making it difficult for folks to kind of approach this world and this culture?
Um, well, like many things, I think it's complicated. I mean, first of all, gatekeeping, in my opinion, is never cool. Um, but um, I'm kind of plugged into the tabletop industry, and I see both sides of it. I see, thankfully, more people than not are embracing a lot of this new stuff, embracing, using technology in new ways to, enhance their gaming experience. And I've seen a lot of the old guard, um, kind of bristling against some of it. But I not very. That's more like case by case. Some isolated incidents. For the most part, I think the old guard, at least for me, like seeing more people getting into it. It's like almost like vindication. Like, see, I was right to like it so many years ago. You just treated me like I was weird, and I was right, and now we're all the weird. What is it? It's like from The Incredibles. It's like if we're all the weird ones, no one's a weird one.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Like, I think that gatekeeping, it happens everywhere and for the stupidest reasons. And you may have a legitimate reason to be upset, but most of the time you're being a dick, you know? And maybe the person who's trying to come to your table is also a dick, and so you're being a dick. But if you're gatekeeping people who aren't the person who beat you up in high school and are just, I'm trying to experience this new thing, now you're the one being the dick, you know? And like, do you have a reason to be upset? Probably. Are you taking it out on the right person? Probably not. You know? And so gatekeeping's not really healthy, but I think that part of the problem for them is that as more people come into the game's going to change because they're going to put their own version of it out into the world. People start playing D&D and they start writing homebrew, you know? And that's going to feed from their own experiences, and it's not going to be the exact same thing that the old guards always had. And you're going to get different people in the writer's room and working on development in those. And like everything else in life, it's going to change. It's not going to stay the same. And you can be like, well, I played AD&D. I got the brown box. I got the white box. I got all the boxes, man. But if you're an asshole, at the end of the day, you're just an asshole. Like, if you're not bringing people to the table, trying to foster a good community, giving them a chance, and if they don't work out, cutting them loose, then you're not really doing your own due diligence to lift the community up that you love so much, you know? And for people, it's hard to deal with change. That's just a fact of life, especially if you've been playing since the 80s. But there's nothing wrong with someone like me who's a 5th edition baby sitting down and saying, well, why not have a green tiefling and do cosmetics matter? You know? So, like, that's just my 2 cents on it.
I'm a same believer in that. Like, be whatever color you want.
Yeah, if it's
it doesn't change.
cosmetic,
It doesn't change the rules. But one thing you said in there, when you said like people will naturally do like their homebrew and all that, remind me something that a good friend of mine, who's a really great game designer, Mike Selinker. He's written a lot of stuff for Dungeons and Dragons. He used to work for Wizard Coast. Anyway, one of the things that he's fond of telling people, because he gets questions all the time where people say, well, the rule in your game wasn't quite clear on this one thing. Can my character use 2 daggers, or is he really limited to 1? Right? Like questions like that. And his answer almost all the time is, well, did you buy the game? Yeah. All right, it's your game. Do whatever you want with it. You own it. Do whatever you want.
yeah.
I made some rules. It's the way I viewed it, but it's your game. You bought it. You're playing with your friends. Are you having fun? That's what matters to me. Just have fun.
Do what works for you. Don't ruin other people's fun. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Well said, both of y'all. Well said. I gotta tell you, man. Like, it always felt like for a community like the nerd and geek community that's, what I'm saying, historically been ostracized, attacked, and like, made to feel other. It's kind of weird that they would actually draw on those experiences and actually want to put somebody else through that, knowing that they themselves have been through it. That's me personally. That's my take on it. I hope that, I don't offend nobody with that, but I just kind of got to call it like I see it. So I kind of want to take this time out to just thank both of you guys for joining me tonight. It was awesome to have you on. Evan, Eddie, man, I appreciate it very much, bro. I've been trying to get this done for a while. I'm happy that you were able to come on. I really do hope both of you do decide to come back.
It's great being here.
Yeah, man. Like, if you guys ever want to like reach out and jump back on, or if you guys want to jump on this any of the other things that we're working on right now, like between the website and just everything else that we've been just pushing together, you guys are more than welcome. We're trying to increase that community. We believe that all everybody that's kind of just doing this passion or engaging in this stuff in this culture, should have their voice amplified, and people pull stuff together to be able to make that amplification that much more oomph. So I'm like, I'm all for it. So, but like, really though, truly, from everybody over here at the Nerds List, thank you both for showing up, and I really do hope you guys decide to come back.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great time.
With that being said, really quick, I just want to make a quick plug to a really cool charity that I've noticed. It's been on my mind for the last few days. I just kind of want to do my part to use the platform responsibly. Want to talk a little bit about the Animal Welfare Institute. Since 1951, the Animal Welfare Institute has been alleviating suffering inflicted on animals by humans. In the early years, AWI founder Christian Stevens sought to end cruel treatment of animals in experimental laboratories, and inevitably, her work expanded to take on other animal welfare cases. With that being said, their mission is through engagement with policymakers, scientists, industry, and the public, AWI seeks to abolish factory farms, support high welfare family farms, and achieve humane slaughter for animals raised for food, improve the housing and the handling of animals in research, and encourage the development and implementation of alternatives to experimentation on live animals, end the use of steel jaw leg hold traps and reform other brutal methods of capturing and killing wildlife, preserve the species threatened with extinction, and protect wildlife from harmful exploitation and destruction of critical habitat, protect companion animals from cruelty and violence, including appalling conditions in the commercial trade, and prevent injury and death of animals caused by harsh transport conditions. If you feel so inclined to want to go check out the Animal Welfare Institute, you can go to awionline.org, and there they have a section where you can both, take action and donate, as well as learn a little bit more about their history and who they are and how they've influenced policies and change for the welfare of animals across the country and the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you for because I didn't know about that one, and that's actually an issue that's like really hits close to me is animal welfare. I'm big on that. So I'm definitely gonna look into that.
Definitely. I tried to save that last part of the episode for something like that, just plug something a little bit bigger than ourselves, and just be mindful that I'm trying to leave the planet in better condition than I found it. But once again, thanks a lot for showing up, guys, and thank anybody who's showing up to watch us over here at the Nerds List. And once again, my name is Mike. I'm here with my buddy Ed and my buddy Evan, aka Moosh. This is In the Lenses.
Peace.